Okay. And then I am going to get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is introduce Andrea because she's going to kind of help guide our discussion tonight. So Andrea Anderson has joined us. She is a Women of AR ambassador. And I'll mention Andrea is responsible for the video project you're going to see rolling out over the next few weeks. We released the first reel today. Andrea had this idea and collected video snippets created by women in our community and edited those into these reels. We've got 5 of them that are kind of a snapshot of what AR is about and what Women of AR is about. And so we're going to release those just to kind of give people a little idea of what Women of AR is and what AR is. And so I think they're going to be fun. So many thanks to Andrea for spearheading that project. I think it's going to be super fun. You're going to like it. So Andrea also, so I don't forget to mention, is organizing an AR 101 clinic for women in Virginia on March 23rd. She's built this clinic around a local orienteering meet there, and they'll also be doing a group mountain bike ride. It's going to be an awesome day. It's limited to 10 women. So if you're in the Richmond, Williamsburg area, check that out. Get with Andrea right away if you want to be in that exclusive group of 10 who are going to be able to learn from this amazing veteran racer and get a really cool orienteering meet and a ride that day and some other activities. You can find more about that. There's an event set up on our Women of AR group. So go to our event page and you'll see all the details in the agenda for that. So Andrea races on a mixed gender team, Thisability AR, which is a team that champions the cause of people with developmental disabilities by focusing on what they can do rather than what they can't do. So that's the name, Thisability. And Andrea began adventure racing in 2016. And initially she preferred racing solo. She teamed up with Chip for their first expedition length race in Belize in 2018. And she's raced now in expedition races all over the world. You can find a slew of really engaging race reports, their AR podcast, on their website, thisabilityracing.com. If you go there, get ready to settle in for a while because it's sort of like getting your favorite trail running or mountain biking magazine in the mail. You just like want to go through every bit of it. So here's their website, thisabilityracing.com. Their blog is full of race reports, their podcast, coaching and clinics coming up. It's a really great website. It's a great resource in and of itself. So that's Andrea. I'll kick it over to her, and I want her to talk first about the team that went to the C2C and your role on that team, Andrea.
Well, thank you for such a glowing introduction. I don't think I haven't had to listen to someone introduce me like that in a very long time. So thank you for that. And thank you for mentioning our website because I started that and I keep it up and I kind of wonder if anyone ever goes to it, because I'm on Facebook all the time and I have to have a special reason to go to a website. So, but I think of it as like a scrapbook. So that's what our website is. And most everything we do, I feel like is my own personal scrapbook. So I can remember things, our podcast and our videos and yeah. Anyway, thanks for the introduction. So yeah, I raced with Chip, who is my partner, my boyfriend, my life partner. And we have raced with almost 30 people over the years. I was counting them up recently, and it's about 30 people that we've raced with. So the last race that we did, and I should say it's because we've done a lot of different races and we've raced for so long. And it's really hard to find people that can do the same race that you can race with and do all of the same races with over and over. So it's not because we always want to keep changing teammates. But this time, Mark Bolliard and Mike Kushner were available. And we knew them both because they're kind of in the Eastern coast here. And a lot of us, if you go to enough races, you end up running into each other, and you also end up seeing like where you fit in as far as your speed and fitness level and your skill set. And so we had met Mike at the Solo National Championships, and he came in right around the time that Chip did, which was really impressive, which was um, a long time ahead of me. Like they got a lot more points than I did in the solo nationals. I still am proud of myself for that anyway. That's a whole nother story. But anyway, that's how we thought Mike would be a good fit. And then Mike, Mark. So Mike, I might get their names intertwined and I will try not to do that. But Mike Kushner, he had raced with Team Ozarks in Expedition Africa. And so we flipped, leapfrogged with them several times and kind of saw their team dynamics. And he had done a few other races that we had been around too, like he did Expedition Colorado. But anyway, so the four of us were on the team, and Chip was the lead navigator, but knowing that all of us navigate, we assumed that we would all take a role at some point. And so Chip did primarily bike, and Mike did primarily foot. And I was slated to do the paddle, and I passed that along right away. We can talk more about that, but I was really glad to not have to do that. And Mark was our logistics person. And so I say I'm really glad not to do that, because I feel like in most of our teams, I feel like I'm the one who fills in the gaps. Like we don't always race with people that we've raced with before. So we kind of learn what each other can contribute or not in the race. And so a lot of times if I might become the navigator if Chip is, needs a break, or there's no one else on the team who's a better navigator. But on this team, all three of those guys are great navigators. And me doing the paddle, I just even right away thought it was funny, because Mike is a sailor and he's been a sail instructor and he's been at the Olympic level and he's used to these open waters. And I'm thinking to myself, why am I navigating something that is so ideally suited for someone else on the team? So it's not that I don't like navigating and I didn't want to have that role, but I definitely wasn't as confident knowing these guys. So anyway, I'm going and going and going. Where should I go now?
That was actually one of the questions I was going to have. So I'm really glad that you went into that, because I was curious, being a navigator myself, one of the reasons I don't really race with men anymore is because it seems like there's always this expectation that the man is going to have the map. And I am not very good at following men around in the woods with them having the map. I recognize this. It's not my strong suit. And so I don't adjust to that very well. And so it's really interesting. I'm sure it says a lot about my personality that I'm a little too controlling to do that. So I wondered how it is being a great navigator yourself to let someone else have that role. And are you able to just let that go and have confidence that they're going to steer you in the right direction?
Pretty much. I mean, when things start getting iffy, you're kind of like, why did we miss that turn? Or why do we have to go back for something? If, like, you start to think, if I were doing it, we wouldn't be having to do this. But
yeah. And so how do you keep that to yourself? Or do you? Like, does that
I pretty much keep it to myself. I mean, because it never helps the situation to put any negative out there. If the mistake has already been made, like I might try to contribute to the solution, but I'm not going to say, oh, I wouldn't have done that, but I'm very used to navigating with Chip because he taught me. So, like when your teacher is the one you're questioning, it's a little different dynamic. And oftentimes he and I are the strongest navigators on the team. And that's good and bad, because I'm not that. I mean, I make mistakes too. So sometimes I want to be off the hook. Like, I don't know. I just appreciate when each person on the team is doing what they do best. And if I'm not the one that does that best, that's fine. It really is. And especially fine if I'm trying to keep up.
Yeah.
So
right.
I felt like this race, I'd be pushing myself harder and faster than in other races. So I already went into the race thinking, well, I don't want to take on as much of a role as I might could in other teams because I'm going to be struggling just to keep up.
Yeah,
So,
right. Navigating slows you down for sure.
and I get like, I just get anxiety, I guess, like it's just a lot of things coming in at you. Like if you're thinking about, oh, I got to keep up, I got to keep up, I got to keep up. It's hard to think, okay, how much further till the next turn? But at the same time, that can calm your nerves too, where you're like, trying to figure out where you're going to turn next and you don't even think about the rest of it. But yeah, anyway,
Yeah.
I was happy with my role and it turned out fine.
And so you hinted at this a little bit before we went on the recording. Can you talk about what your team goals were going into C2C?
Yeah, our goal was to win, which I feel funny just even saying that because that's never, I don't know if that's ever been our goal, honestly.
Well, and so what was different about this race? Or was it your team or the competition, or what made you feel
Well,
like you had the confidence to say we can go in this thing to win?
uh, well, we did know it would be a long shot with one other team. So we looked at the list of teams that were coming. And so that always gives you a little bit of an idea, like where you might be stacked up. And of course, some we didn't know. So, and then the ones we did know, Hightower Racing, just had a lot of fast, experienced people on it. It was just like, oh, we know they're probably going to win. But we also know that anyone can have a bad day. So, and we were also looking at Rev 3, who also has some fast, experienced teammates on that team. So we kind of figured, at least we could be in the top 5. So we might as well try to win. um, and of course, it didn't happen, but we're also really good at adjusting our goals on the fly. Like, I don't know that our goal has ever stayed the same when we start the race to when we finish the race. Like, yeah, our goal was to win, but then when we realized that um, it, things adjust, let me just say that. And if you're doing your ultimate best, you're going as fast as you can, and it's slipping away from you. Well, our next goal along the line was going to be to clear the course. So we gave up on that goal too. And like, well, now what's our goal? You got to find something to keep you going. And so we knew we weren't going to clear. And then, then we wanted to be on the podium. And of course, the whole time we just wanted to push and see what we could do as a team. And our team dynamic was really more important than all those goals combined.
So this was the first time the 4 of you had raced together.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so what was your sleep strategy going into this race? And as I said at the outset, you all have got a ton of expedition experience. So I think people are going to be really interested to hear what your sleep strategy was going into a 72-hour race.
Yeah. So everything is so relative. And, I remember the first time I did the C2C, 6 years ago, it's just so different. 72 hours seemed like so long. And now I think like, wow, 72 hours is like just a flash. We've had other races where one leg of the race was 72 hours. So, and that wasn't on purpose. We made it 72 hours. But anyway, we do not sleep on the first night. It's usually too challenging for any of us to sleep. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but when you're moving, your heart rate's up and you're in it. Like, I don't usually get tired at all on the first night, and not many of my teammates have. So we planned to go all the way through the first night, and then whatever leg we were on when we knew we would be going into the second night, then we decided we'd take our sleep kits with us basically from then on out in case we needed them. And we had hoped to make it all the way to the O relay section, which I think was the 4th leg, 5th leg, 6 and 7. Sorry. So there was like a prologue trek, then there was a paddle, then there was a bike trek bike. And we hoped to make it all through that to get to the O relay, where we knew on that TA we'd have our bins and we had a tent. So we were going to try to sacrifice any little sleeps in order to get one big sleep at this good TA where we knew we would have a tent and shelter, and we knew we'd get a good chunk instead of just a little bit. I do think we stopped maybe for a 20-minute little nap refresher before that. Yeah, probably just to take the edge off. But then when we did get to the O relay, we set up our tent and we slept 3 hours, and all of us were pretty wrecked. So we had to change our plan. Instead of sending half of this race, the relay, you could send 1, 2, 3, or 4 people out on each segment of the relay. So you had to, but you could only get those points in that segment of the relay, if you know what I mean. So you're given one map, you go do those points, and you get the next map and go do those points. And we didn't have the maps ahead of time for that. That's the only maps that they give you en route. And so a lot of teams, they take turns sleeping while the other half of the team goes out. But we were all too wrecked. We all needed sleep. It didn't make sense to send anyone out there as tired and as dumb as we felt. So we all slept for 3 hours, packed it all up, went out, felt great. Amazing how much of a difference a good sleep makes. And a good sleep, I think, means you have to have shelter of some sort, and ideally your own tent. You have to have a sleeping mat. You have to have like a comfortable sleeping bag, or, a bivy sack, but sometimes those get sweaty. So I really prefer a regular sleeping bag. And usually that stuff, like the sleeping bag and the tent, we don't carry around with us in our backpacks. We just have that in our bin. So that means we're going to be sleeping at a TA, which is, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but it definitely means you need earplugs and a sleep mask. So I think those are all those things. And I've even taken melatonin. So one melatonin will just take the edge off, so to where your mind is not ruminating on too much stuff. And anyway, that was a great sleep, and it's just what we needed. We did take, after that, like I said, we took our sleep kits with us. And for me, that means that I'm taking my pad for the ground, and it's just a Walmart pad that's the accordion kind, and it's cut in half. So really the only parts that get cold, I feel like, are the shoulder and my hip, like I'm a side sleeper. And so if I just have that short pad, that's enough. And then a bivy sack. So we didn't take all the extra stuff, but we did use that. At least one other time, we took about 40 minutes before the next paddle. So we did that. And then we had one more like 20-minute sleep when we were in like a midway into the final bike. So yeah, we were glad we had that stuff with us. But that was our sleep played out the way we thought it would.
So Megan asked, what earplugs do you use to try to block out snoring in the TA, or from a teammate outside of the TA, I guess?
Well, yeah, luckily I have some experience with this in my personal life. So I practice wearing earplugs to bed every night.
But do you just use regular foam ones? Because those don't, I also have that issue with my partner, but like when I'm keyed up and then everybody, it's not just one person usually, it's multiple people, like cacophony of snoring, and I want to punch people.
Yes. No, I don't have anything special. I use the foam ones too. And sometimes if they're too long, I cut them because they kind of hurt my head. So yeah, I don't have any magic ones. I have ones I like more than the others, and I don't know where I got them, and they're still just foam. So
I've got the little ones that are not foam, that are, it's probably silicone, that you really put pretty far into your ear canal. and they seem to me to block noise better. But the one downside to them is they can get a little tender on your ear if you're sleeping an extended period. But if you're just sleeping 2 or 3 hours, they probably are not going to be too bad.
Yeah, and I can't say enough about practicing every single thing that you want to do in a race. Like I'm, kind of joking about wearing them every night because I do, but it is something you should just try out at home and see how it feels, because it's going to feel the same way in the race. If the pressure is expanding too much in your ear and it hurts, that's going to happen in the race too.
Well, and then I can be thankful to my partner for the opportunity to practice and not just
That's all right.
mad.
Me too. I feel you.
And another question is, what kind of bivy sack? What bivy sack do you use? Wild Style says she used hers for the first time and had a lot of condensation inside, which is definitely an issue.
So yeah, I hate that about the SOL
It was awful.
the blanket bivy sacks. They're not, yeah. I have one of those and I did not use that one this time because in Africa they were selling a bag called the Rad bag, and it did not have a reflective surface. Well, it didn't have that silvery surface. It is considered an emergency blanket. I wonder if we could even find them in the States anymore. I'll try to find it and share a link if I can. But it felt a little bit like a potato sack almost, but soft. It was breathable, and I did not end up getting sweaty, which is the worst thing about those SOL bivy sacks. And I don't know a way around it, except that I do know some people use a sleeping bag liner inside of the bivy sack. But I feel like if you're doing that, you're getting close to the weight of just a regular sleeping bag. So why not take a sleeping bag? If you're going to take this liner and a bivy, then just take what else? But this race didn't have, it specified that each team had to have one bivy sack for an emergency, but it didn't specify what type each person had. And you had to have a space blanket, but that's the worst way to try to stay warm to sleep. They're great to stay warm when you're moving and they're crinkle and they're loud, but if you try to sleep in that, it's terrible. But anyway, that's why I took the Rad bag, and I was happy with that.
Are you saying RAB, R-A-B, or R-A-V?
R-A-D as in dog.
Rad. Okay, Rad.
Rad.
Okay, yeah, we'll look that up and we'll try to post a link. Okay, so let's look a little bit. Let's talk through the course and how the race unfolded for you all. I've got your track pulled up here, and we know that you started with this little trekking leg. Why don't you just talk us through, and if there's nothing particularly noteworthy or memorable about a given leg, just flip us through that and let's get to some interesting stuff. Kind of tell us about the race a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that right away you don't know where you stand, because people either got 1, 2, 3, 4 points on that opening trek that was more like a prologue, or some of them skipped it altogether. So we went counterclockwise, which was the less popular way to go. And I think that paid off a little bit because we didn't have to stand in line for the punch. But yeah, then when we got to our boats, we're like, wow, there's a lot of people here already. Or maybe they had all already been there. Like, I don't know, it's just right away. You don't know where you stand in these things. There's just, people make choices that are different right off the bat. And yeah, we got on the water and things were going just fine. That first point, that's where I decided to hand off the maps to Mike. So we got to that inlet where you could go either by the inlet or that trail. And we had thought we were going to go in the inlet. And we stopped at the inlet and I said, okay, here we are. This is it. And I wasn't 100% sure, or maybe I didn't exude confidence. And so we kept going just to be sure. And the way we were sure is we saw, where all the boats were parked around that trail. And so we took the trail, and you can see that you need to take a left where there's a bend in the trail. And of course, those trails, they weren't they're not as obvious, as they are on the map. But anyway, I kept following whoever was in front of me and I didn't take the left. And I'm like, oh, I'm already getting freaked out about being around so many people and navigating. And that's when I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do this. I'm not the best person for this. And I passed the maps off right there. But anyway, the rest of the paddle, it got progressively more challenging because of the wind. We got around to that lighthouse that was there at the south side, and this is open water. There's nothing, no land at all to see on the right, and you can see how far away the shore was eventually when we kind of cut that corner. There was a team that High Point actually went north and went up through that, right up through there, and found a cut through. I think that was really, really a big chance on their part, but it paid off for them.
It was
Sometimes that's how it
interesting
goes.
though. I would have expected them to cut through here, but they didn't. They
I
actually
know.
north, which was really shocking. They went like way north and had to come down.
Yes, I thought that was really strange too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if that was intentional or if they just missed that cut through right there, because it seemed like the obvious way once you headed up that way.
Well, if you've been in areas like that where it's just seagrass and little inlets,
Yeah.
it's really hard to tell.
Yeah.
I would think they might not have done that on purpose.
Yeah, I would think so too. I would think that once you got up this, you would certainly want to take that connector over, but
Yeah.
okay.
But it was pretty sketchy. And I remember thinking, this is not a beginner race. Right off the bat, we're in this really challenging water. And I felt conflicted because I feel like I've told so many people that this is a great first expedition race. And I still stick by that. But most of the time this race has been further south. It's been a shorter route and there's been more options. So there was no way to shorten this distance. So if you were a first timer and you thought, well, I just want to get across the state, that's great, but you do have to get across the state. And there was basically no reason to skip any of these points because they're all on the way. And a lot of the race was kind of that way this time because the distance was so much longer going on the north side of Florida.
Sorry, I was just going to say, and it's a very different thing to say this is a good first expedition race than to say this is a good first adventure race. Those are two very different things.
Yes, I am so glad you said that because you're exactly right. And there is some good things to having the paddle of this nature first because everyone was fresh. It's the first day, no one's tired. There wasn't a lot of route choice, so I don't think anyone got hung up, in which way to go. But it was unfortunate to some of the particularly solos whose boats flipped and needed assistance getting back in, and like I said, it's just, and the C2C too often has a whole lot of races often have a leg that is like the monster leg. And I'm not sure I would call this a monster leg, but it was a leg that you could not shorten and you just had to get through it. Yeah.
All right. And then
it's also hard I meant to say too, it's hard to eat and drink on the paddle. So that's also kind of tricky in the beginning of a race when you already start kind of behind on nutrition and fluids. Just really, that's a hard lesson to learn too. So I think some of the newer racers might have learned that a little bit the hard way, but it stinks, you're working really hard to keep going, keep making forward progress against the wind. So every bite you take costs a little bit back. Anyway, that was how it started.
So I know you've got a PFD that has a bladder. You have a bladder in your PFD, right? A sleeve.
Yes.
Yeah, which I think is just critical to making sure you drink enough on the paddle because you're not going to stop paddling and take a water bottle as often as you need to, but you can hold your hose in your mouth for a while and at least you'll drink a little bit. What do you eat on the paddle?
So I eat things that I could take enormous bites of. Like I'll take a huge bite and be feeling like I'm chewing 3 bites worth. Um, so any kind of bars. This time I ate the Little Debbie peanut butter cream pies, which there's nothing little about them, you know, they're about this big. You can almost fit one in your mouth, and they're like 450 calories for one of them. I'm like,
Nice.
that fit the bill this time. But I
Yeah.
did think to myself that I think I'm gonna sacrifice my bladder to hold scratch. And I say sacrifice because it's hard to clean out a bladder after you've put powdery stuff in there or anything that's not water. But I really wished I didn't have to be eating my calories. And, maybe someday I'll even graduate to 4-hour fuel, which I haven't tried yet. But liquid calories would be a really good solution for a paddle.
Yeah.
And also liquid calories that you don't have to stop paddling to be drinking.
Yeah. I've become a big fan lately of peanut M&Ms on the bike and on the paddle. It seems like I can just like toss in a huge mouthful of those and just work on them for a while.
Yeah.
They've become kind of one of my favorite new race foods.
Yeah, they're so good.
All right, so let's talk about your bike. Anything here of note?
Well, the red line is the Florida Trail, and it is in different shapes of disrepair throughout. We thought it was slow going in some parts and faster than we'd expect in other parts. But then when we saw that route to the south of the red line right there. Yeah. That was actually off of the map, but you could imagine it going through, and we were pretty sure it did. So it did. It really paid off. We passed a lot of people there, and we got to get off that northern route that seemed to be taking people longer. I think that's also the route where we were thinking we were going really fast. We were ahead of our times, and we were totally excited until we hit the hurricane damage part. Was that this leg? Yeah. So right around there, those points that are together, yeah, that there was major hurricane damage in there. And we were carrying our bikes up and over and around and through. And that's one of the times where I thought, I wish I could see the maps. And I wonder if I would choose the same way. But I know everyone was kind of working on the solution, and so it took us a while, but we might not have chosen the best route because the Florida Trail, I think, was also an option, and we thought that would be just as damaged. And then some people ended up taking power lines to get to the next place instead of either trails. And I'm sorry if I'm confusing this with the second bike leg. I might be. I don't think so, but either way, it was so challenging because trees were down for, maybe even more than a kilometer. And we were like dropping our bikes and roaming around to see if we could see the next trail marker. And then going back to get our bikes and then figuring out the best way to get to the next trail marker, and just took so much time. It kind of took the wind out of our sails. We were glad to be out of that, but we just kept thinking, there's no way out of it but to go through it. And in hindsight, we could have done some things differently. Like you can see where the power line is right there. Yeah, that we could have. Yeah, I think we could have taken advantage of that a little bit. Either way,
I mean,
the maps. So
yeah, it seems like, the reason these points are so compact and they're so close together, when a race director does that, right, they're keeping you from taking this road. So, the race director intentionally placed these points so that you would be on the exact trails you were on, right? And they did that to try to keep you off this road. And so, you know, it was a trade-off for them. Basically, they wanted you to be on those crappy trails.
But I think also it's a way to provide challenge for experienced teams and provide an out for people who were not going for all of the points. So I
Yeah,
think it was perfectly fine if you did take the road. It just meant you're sacrificing those points.
sure.
So yeah, generally this race is pretty good at providing alternatives for if you just want to get across the state or if you're trying to get as many points as possible.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you would have flown right through this if you had just stayed on the road right up to that next TA, right?
Right,
They
exactly.
were definitely slowing you down by putting those points out there
That's right.
intentionally. Yeah.
Yeah, the next
You got a
leg,
big old trek.
yeah, that I think was the thing I was the most nervous about is 35 miles. What, that's 56K, 57K almost. And I knew that my teammates wanted to run as much as possible, which is not something I have ever loved. I'm beginning to like it more. I did fine. I kept up just fine. I carried all my own stuff the whole race. I was never towed, but I was still nervous. And it went fine. I mean, it was some rolling trails and it got challenging, you know, once or twice with the nav. Sometimes it was tricky to know, like, is this point coming up going to be one that we have to be surgical in our navigation, or can we just roll up to it? And I think, you know, sometimes we were more sloppy than we wanted to be or than we should have been on some points. And then other points when we were really surgical, like we were going exactly this far and we're going to pace count and we're going to get the bearing just right. And we're going to, you know, go this far off the trail and we did everything just perfectly. Those would be the ones that were like, oh, it's right there, right off the trail. Like, and it was that happened to us once or twice. And I think this is also where we were leapfrogging with Rev 3. And so Shelley Johansson was on their team and we were going along the road and they just come walking up at this, like, you know, really, really fast walking pace. And it was really kind of funny because they kind of walked right through us and Shelley was in the lead with that. And like, man, she's walking fast. So of course, what do? We walk fast. And then, you know, we did do a little bit of jogging. She said they never jogged at all. They were just not going to do it. And we ended up seeing them other places too, because we would make a mistake or whatever. And so, you know, the time running, did it benefit us? It probably benefited our team because we're making some mistakes. So I don't necessarily think our mistakes were because we were running. Like sometimes, you know, when your heart rate gets so high, you start making bad choices and you can't think as straight. But I think we were just making legitimate errors. I don't think it was because we were maxed out on our heart rate. Either way, it's always something to consider if you're running and then starting to make mistakes. It could be because you're trying to go too fast. So
Yeah, that's a great point. So why don't you talk about, this is the first time we see your team drop some points. Why don't you tell us what that decision was?
oh, well, this was a bike leg, and this section is where there's A and B points. And so in order to get one full point, you had to find the A point, and at the A point, there would be a map that shows you where the B point is, and you have to plot that on your map, and then go find the B point in order to get one full point. So we did one full point. So we found an A and B. It was in these fun mountain bike trails, except that occasionally they were completely submerged. So when they were fun, they were a lot of fun. And when they weren't, they were a lot of not fun. And so we did the one point, we're like, we've got to figure out what we need to do because this cutoff is looming. So we sat under a bypass bridge, so it was dry, and we assessed how long we thought it would take us to get from the cutoff, you know, backmath from the cutoff, and then backmath at the O relay, and then backmath to where we were. And so we decided we needed to start cutting points to make it to the cutoff in time. And we got another I think we got 2 AB points, and then decided they're taking so long and we'd probably benefit us more to get more points later on in the race. So we started cutting. And that, in hindsight, well, we would still make the same decision, because when we got to the O relay, we got there and we did our sleep, and then we got 2 points on the O relay A, and we got 2 points on the O relay B, and we were done. And then they told us the cutoff had been moved. So they moved the cutoff from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. for the next leg. So we're like, okay, well, that kind of throws off what we've already done. We already made decisions to cut things. So other teams that were in that AB bike section, they stayed there a lot longer. They would not have made the cutoff. And I think the race directors were kind of thinking, well, we've got to extend this, because if we don't, no one's going to get through, basically. So, okay, that's fine. You know, kind of felt a little bit deflated about that, but we also thought that Rev 3 was back there lost in the bikes, because we'd heard some, you know, gossip and stuff around the TAs. So we set off, and we did that next trek, which was, it was fun. It was in a nice park. And again, we did a lot of jogging. We did some cut throughs that saved us a lot of time bushwhacking instead of staying on the trails. And the trek itself took us over to the canoe launch. And this was another place where we had gotten conflicting information. So we had heard from a volunteer at the previous TA that the St. John's portion of the river was going to be closed. So we were kind of excited about that. And it was due to high winds. So that's what we heard first. Then we do this trek leg and we get to the canoe put in. And that volunteer told us that no, things had changed. The competitive teams, meaning, I guess, the teams that hadn't been assisted yet, they would be required to go to the next TA by boat. They would have to do the full paddle. And the non-competitive teams would be transported and would not have to do the St. John's. So that was our understanding. So we did the paddle. It was beautiful paddle. It was a full moon, really calm water. It just was a really good paddle. There were some nice points back in some backwater. And then it started getting stressful, because like, this cutoff is coming and we have to make it through the St. John's in enough time to meet the cutoff. So I finally convinced the team that we had to drop a point, because they were judging the speed we were going by the rate we were going in the backwater. And I was like, you know, we're just never going to make it, because that's about 11 miles. It's more than 10 miles. And it's going to be windy and choppy, and we're not going to make as good speed as we are. So they finally agreed. We dropped 1 paddle point so that we could try to make it as fast as we could across the St. John's. Well, then we got to the mouth of the St. John's, and a volunteer stopped us and said, sorry, it's closed for everybody now. So you have to get out, and we're transporting you. So once again, we dropped another point, because we were trying to meet a cutoff that, so the cutoff still existed. So we were like relieved, like, okay, so now we've got that much more time. We don't have to worry about the cutoff. And we thought that everybody else would still have to worry about it. And, you know, come to find out later, they transported everybody across it, and the cutoff was kind of disregarded pretty much. So that was disappointing to us at the end of the race, because we thought that if you did not make that cutoff, that you would be considered short coursed and that you'd be ranked below people who were not short coursed. And then there were something like 50 teams that left that last TA after the cutoff, and there was no consequence for that. So, you know, I don't think they would do the same thing again, but it kind of does speak to how different races have different rules, you know, and this was not an ARWS race, and they don't do short and long course categories, you know. And I'd say in ARWS races, when a change is made to a course, they usually have it in writing, and you sign off that you read exactly what you were supposed to read, and you don't get extra information from anywhere. You know, the volunteers are not supposed to tell you any information. I prefer that, you know. I think it would have been more straightforward. Like, I think usually a short course means, or if you don't meet a cutoff, it usually means you have to take an alternate route. And it usually means the alternate route means that you have fewer points that you're allowed to get. But in this case, there was no one saying, okay, it's 6 o'clock now, you cannot get these points anymore. Because they could have, you know, cut off those points towards the end on the peninsula to say, okay, you didn't get to the cutoff in time, you can't get these points. But they didn't have it structured that way. So, you know, that's how it goes.
So you have to wonder what the purpose of the cutoff was originally.
Yeah, I kind of wondered that too. You know, usually I think the cutoffs are so that people, you know, make sure they're moving themselves through the course. And like I said, in other races we've done, it means that there's an alternate route if you miss that cutoff.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you know, they did have a team that were working to make sure it was fair. And I'm sure, knowing how many teams were coming through at that point, I don't know if that also played into their decision-making on, you know, how the final rankings went, but, and I don't know when the last team went through there, but I do know there were some teams that did take, a route straight to the finish without going north. You know, they took that road to the south and didn't get any points at all. But they weren't mandated to do that, I don't think. So,
Yeah. Well, it's frustrating when you've made decisions and dropped points based on what you think the rules are, and then the rules change, and no, yeah, that's frustrating.
yes. I mean, I will say too, though, almost every race we've done, something has changed. You know, whether it's this thing was canceled for bad weather, or, you know, any number of things. Like even in Croatia, all of the paddle legs were canceled and things were changing all the time. But they had a little bit more of a system as to how to handle that and to make sure that all teams got the same information at the same time. And yeah, so I don't know, that was disappointing. I think they're not going to do that the same in the future, but I think it was just what they had to do at the time to make sure everybody, I don't know, I'm not going to speak for them. That was our experience.
All right, so you cleared the course then into the finish. Yeah, and so what about what lessons learned, things that you're reflecting on, looking back on? You said you keep thinking about things that could have done differently, or you would do differently next time.
So I think I would, what would I do differently? I would be a little bit more involved in certain things. Like, and I was, but the logistics is something that Mark Bolliard did primarily. And I think that's a good person to have a backup as. So I felt like I was his backup. And like I said, when we needed to make time, I was like, come on, we're going to miss this cutoff if we don't move. And so sometimes I feel like maybe I should have spoken up when I didn't, but maybe that was just that one time. And just that regret of I'm usually erring on the side of caution when it comes to strategy instead of trying to push it, like, so when our team was deciding to cut points, I'm usually the one saying, yeah, you're right. I'm not usually the one that says, oh, we need to go for some more. So I regret little things like that I haven't lost any sleep over that.
Think
Yeah.
about that for a second. And I saw Jackie asked in the chat box, how did you just get your route printed? And Jackie, I think you're talking about where I showed what their route was on the course. On the tracker.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Instead of getting everybody's,
Yeah. So I just clicked. What was your team number, Jackie?
Ours was 174.
174. Let's see. Where we find you? Wow, they're not in order. That makes it a lot harder, doesn't it?
If you click on the list of names on the left, like if you
Yeah.
scroll down, you might find it that way.
There,
You were in the assisted category, right?
yes, yes.
Here we go. 170.
There.
Wandering Wicks. So it's gonna put there, it's gonna make your little dot jump. When we click on your dot, if I hit more, now we see your route.
Okay, yeah, that abbreviated route that we took.
That looks like a pretty long way to me. I gotta pan way out to see the distance you covered, Jackie. I don't think there's anything for you to be embarrassed about.
I just meant on that last Viking segment where there was a change and they told us we could do that lower route.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did.
Yeah.
And just kind of cruised in toward the end there.
Yeah,
But
we
thank
did
you
that
for
as well.
showing us that.
Yeah. So I mean, you finished your first expedition race under your own power.
No, we went assisted. We skipped some segments. There's no doubt.
Yeah. Wow. That's still though, I mean, good for you. That's a lot of persistence right through to the finish. That's a big race.
It was a big race. Yeah, we're proud of ourselves for what we did. There was a lot to learning how to even go about that, how do you even plan, how do you train? And our weather wasn't cooperating around here to get outside and do a whole lot. And I had just come off a broken wrist and a thumb tendon surgery. Just got cleared the end of December to even participate or, really get going. So that paddle got hard on my wrist.
Yeah, no kidding.
But no, we really enjoyed it. We really enjoyed it. We learned so much.
So what, Andrea, you have any other thoughts about lessons learned, tips that you can share?
Yes, I forgot the main one that I keep telling myself this. I've told myself this in other races and I don't know why I don't remember to do this. I am going to make a list that is either on my TA bin or somewhere handy. When we're leaving the TA, we need a list to make sure we haven't forgotten certain things. And of course, one of the things was the tracker that we left on a PFD instead of, grabbing that. So we got about 4K out of the TA and I don't know who asked, but someone's like, we got the tracker, right? And like, nope. So we turned around and got it. But I think a list is like the solution to that. Like I've forgotten other stuff in other races, not this time, but some of that stuff is pretty critical. You need an extra battery. You need your food, you need your water, you need this, you need that. And if you just had a list.
Yeah. Yeah, like on the inside of your lid of your bin or something. Yeah, passports. People leave passports in the TAs all the time. Trackers in the TAs, those maps, maybe they left their one of multiple maps in a TA. Yeah, no, that's a really good idea.
I think
We did a list by leg. I mean, not necessarily didn't put the tracker on it, but okay, don't forget your lights and the batteries and the whatever. But yeah, I had it on my lid.
Well, add the tracker to that list.
Yeah,
Salad.
exactly. That's a
And
good
even
one.
a punch card. Add the punch card to the list.
Right.
Yeah. I think one thing we did better than in other races sometimes is sometimes in other races we've had like team discussions where the whole team wasn't there. Like we'd have like one person was off going to the bathroom or something, and then 3 people are making a decision, or 2 and 2 or something like that. But this race we didn't. We're like, okay, we're all going to focus together while we've got this information right now. You know, I just felt like that was a really good thing we did. Sometimes we haven't done that as well. Of course, you were asking what we would do differently, but I think that communication piece is really important.
Yeah, that's a great, and especially if you're fewer than a 4-person team, like Sarah and I very routinely will race as a 2-woman team, and it's so tempting, and we often have had one person go listen to whatever instruction, and one person is doing this. We're trying to be more efficient, but you end up with, missed information and miscommunication, and you end up, messing something up. And I'm like, well, I knew that because whatever. Or Sarah's like, I never heard that part. And, yeah. So it's a really good point to make sure everybody on the team is fully engaged when you're getting that information. That's critical stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wonder if anybody else wants to, let's take just a couple of minutes. Let's start with Megan. Megan, you want to maybe talk about a lesson learned or reflection on your race that you feel like might be helpful for other women who are tuning into this?
Oh, I didn't race it. I'm C to C curious. So I thought I was gonna ask why C to C. So like I'm in Vermont. It's a long way to go for, it's obviously better than a 24-hour race, but there's a lot of people who go year after year after year. So why?
Yeah, it's a popular one.
Yeah, I still love the race, it's about the people. It's kind of like, the rootstock race. Like, I feel like I want to do that all the time. Even though it's the same place we've been to many times, it's the people, and it's always different. The race is always different just because the route's always different. And Florida itself, it's for all of the reasons that it's an entry level expedition, because it's flat, because there's route options, because the TAs have great food and almost too much food. And the people, it's really fun to race alongside people that and it feels, there are parts of it that feel like a party. So, and
Yeah.
I think it's beautiful too. Like, I don't know if, particularly if you've never been to that sort of environment, it's tropical. This year was less of a wow, in my opinion, than years before. Because we were further north, it was a little less green. We weren't in areas where there were a lot of alligators. Like, usually we see a lot of alligators. I did not see one alligator this whole race, which was really surprising to me. But I think that's kind of cool. So that's why.
What you described just now sounds a lot like the Winter Wildcat Rogaine that we just did in West Virginia, Mark Latanzi's race. This was the first time I had done it, and they get this huge crowd and everybody loves it. And I went and I'm like, oh, it was the party. It was all of your friends. It's a time of year when there aren't other races going on. And so it's something to do in the cold winter months, and you get to see all your AR friends. So yeah, it was.
Sign me up next year then.
Yeah, that's for me, the appeal is, it's something on the calendar during a month that there's not a lot going on and everybody's there. Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
So Jackie, you did the race. What about and you said you've learned lots of things from it. So share one thing that you learned that you feel like might be helpful for the woman doing her first expedition race.
One thing. The TA, the whole transition area experience it, is much bigger and more vast than anywhere, of course, anything we've ever done. So especially coming off that paddle and you're cold and you're wet, and it's the first time you get your bin, and it's like finding, where do they put the bikes? Where do they put the bins? And to decorate your bin so you can find it fast. I think when they all look just alike, we thought we did it enough. No, we did not. It's gonna glow next time, but we spent way too much time in TAs, and we learned that, but it's just more than we've ever done. We just wanted to make sure we were prepared when we went out. So just all that logistics of it.
That's a really great tip, because imagine there are 100 black bins with yellow lids, right?
Yeah. It was a little overwhelming at first, how do you go about this and be efficient? And we were not, but we got better as it went. We also, had heard a lot about, the food and everything. Well, I think you guys had to get in there sooner, get the food. We got to that one after the bike, and she says you can have one hamburger. And I was like, oh, okay, one hamburger it is. And, so it's kind of interesting. And then when we got to other further ones too, it was, we're really running low on this. I can get you this, but I do have ramen noodles too. And I'm like, okay, we already left our PBJs in our van, but we did have our McDonald's cheeseburgers, and we each had 6 of those along the way. And we had plenty of food, don't get me wrong. But I was just realizing that we got to get faster so we get to the food. Whatever motivates you, right?
That's right.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that about the food. And I would say about decorating your bins, if you use reflective tape when you decorate your bin, that's even better. But I guess I do want to just mention again that it's kind of all relative. You know what I mean? Like the transitions at this race, they give you food that they've made. So most adventure races, you're on your own at most all of the TAs. Maybe 1 or 2 of them will provide either a food truck that you have to pay for or nothing, or so when you try to compare this race to other expedition races, there's a lot of niceties about this one, that like the food is one of them, but yeah, anyway, the best part always is being around people that like to do what you want to do, and whether you know them yet or not, just being with your friends, and the best part of any adventure.
Okay, Wild Style. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
It's Patty.
Patty. So
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
you did the race, right?
I did. Yes. I did it with my husband. It was our first expedition race. He had done the 30-hour endless mountains, this past summer. And while he was training for that, he came across the Sea to Sea. And I'll say I was very sedentary a year ago for sure. So, and he said, we were like, oh, that sounds kind of cool, going, from the west coast of Florida to the east coast of Florida. And he's like, well, what's your interest level? I'm like, 8.5, right? And I hadn't done anything at that point. So my goal was to finish if I could, and we did. So, but I think one thing that I learned is you do need sleep at certain times, right? And so I had said to him when we were at that,
Adventure racing is emotional. Let it out.
Yeah.
I didn't think I'd be able to finish after TA4, right? And he was going out for the O relay. He's like, just go lay down again, sleep. And he actually did both legs of that while I slept like another hour or something. And it made such a difference. So I was like, oh, okay, I can go now, but at the time before he did that, I was cold and had been sweaty in my bivy bag. And I was just like, I don't think I can do this, but
And he gave you the space you needed and said,
He did, yep.
yeah, this
Tucked
is
me in,
what,
tucked me in his sleeping bag that was dry. So
that's terrific. So how did the rest of the race go for you after that?
um,
And
went-
by the way, applause to the husband for giving you what you needed to keep going. That's what it takes.
yeah. It went okay, I guess. I mean, I had a problem with my bike for that last leg. Something was wrong with my brake and we couldn't get it, we couldn't adjust it along the way. So I was pedaling with my, brake kind of on from TA whatever to the end. And I was gonna quit, and I'm like, okay, no, it's just a little longer. After we like recalculated, after I stopped like 10 times, he was getting so annoyed with me because I thought it was me, like I didn't have the energy to pedal. And then, well, it was
You
my
realize
bike.
someone was basically pushing your
Right,
bike backwards
exactly,
the whole time.
right. And so that made me feel a little better, and we kept stopping and trying to fix it and just couldn't quite get it. So, but we finished. So
Wow, good for
and
you.
actually second in the masters, so in the co-ed.
Congratulations.
I mean,
Great.
Outstanding.
we did do it. It's hard to believe after, because I didn't think I'd make it. But
That's amazing. So was this your first adventure race?
no, not first adventure race.
Expedition. Okay.
Expedition.
Yeah.
We done well, and we did a bunch leading up to it, and we had done a 6-hour like a year and a half ago or something together and stuff.
Where are you located?
We're in Pennsylvania.
Okay, good deal. So what do you have next on your calendar?
We're doing the DMV April 6th, and then the Delmarva race, and then he's doing the 50-hour, what is that called? The one in West Virginia through
Yeah.
Rev3.
Uh-huh.
He's doing the 50-hour by himself right now. I'm signed up for the 12 by myself for that.
Wow, good deal. So have you navigated before? How do you feel about that?
We have an orienteering background, so on the smaller scale maps, I'm okay. I don't do real well on these 24,000, 50,000 scale maps, but
Well, so you'll have some races to practice between now and then.
for sure, yeah.
So are you all going to do the Two Rivers? Did you see that the Two Rivers is coming back to Pennsylvania?
We saw it. We typically are in Florida in October, so we probably won't be doing that, but
okay. Wow. Well, I'm so proud of you.
but yeah. So
Yeah.
but it was fun. I mean, it was, like during it, I don't know that I'd say it was fun, and people would be like, oh, how you doing? And I'm like, because you want to say, oh, it's great, but you can't make yourself say those words in the middle of the race, or I couldn't. And they're like, you're still going, and I'm like, yeah, right, I'm still going.
That is true.
So
Wow. Well, good for you. I mean, that's a long way to keep going and a long time in the saddle for biking. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Much respect for that. All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up unless Andrea, is there anything else you want to say before we sign off here?
Well, I guess I'll just say that, this was the 6th time I've done this race, and my team's DNF'd before. The very first year, we did not know what we were doing. I mean, I just feel like experience just matters so much. And, the more you do it, the better the experience you are going to have and the more confidence you're going to have. And Patty, I really appreciate you sharing that, your husband helped save the day, because my day has been saved before, and it was saved by my partner. And it still makes me emotional because I'm usually the caregiver. So when he was the one stepping up and taking care of me, this was in Africa, in Lesotho. I had a terrible leg of a race. I was barfing and couldn't keep food down. I never had that. And he took care of me. And it was a really special experience for me. But anyway, like I said, just anyone who's listening, just keep at it. And the more you do it, the more fun it gets, and the more experienced you are, it all compiles to make it a better experience.
All right, ladies, I'm going to stop recording there.